Hey Bays, it's Bailey, and welcome back to another speed build. In case you're wondering why I'm using my sultry ASMR voice, it's because my tonsils are swollen to all hell, and I'm pretty sure I have mono, so that's just tons of fun. Anyway, for this build, I was inspired by a tweet from RoxxySims, where they'd built this residential lot that was a mill converted into a house in the town, I believe. And that reminded me of this used bookstore near where I went to undergrad called the Book Mill. It was this old converted mill that was sitting on this brook or stream or whatever. And I don't know, I just thought that it would be a really interesting idea for a library to go in game, especially on this big empty lot out in the country. I love the juxtaposition of old and new, especially in architecture, so the more rustic aesthetic of all of the build items in cottage living really appeals to me, and I look forward to combining it with some of the more modern elements of the other packs, so I will probably be building a lot more. So anyway, I never really played with terrain tools that much before, but I had a lot of fun experimenting with building the brook, stream, creek, whatever, and, you know, kind of like making this uneven terrain to go around it. You'll see later it did make landscaping a little bit more difficult. Another thing is, before I started this channel, whenever I would build lots, I would build them in reverse of what builders usually do. I'd build and furnish the individual rooms first, and then piece them together like a puzzle. But for this lot, I knew that I was going for a particular shape, and so I wanted to build that like book mill shell first, and then kind of figure out how to customize the interior. And it gave me a little bit of trouble, and I definitely did not fully achieve it. But I am pretty happy with how it came out. I think it's fairly close to the original, and I like that I was able to experiment with these little covered bridges and, you know, putting the roofs on there so you have this nice little path going down towards the stairs. I will say though, the platforms are quite limited. I don't like that you can't match platform foundations and regular lot foundations. So you see when I go to try and put something to cover those platforms, I wasn't able to do the same stilts that I could with the rest of the build. And, you know, I don't know, it'd be nice to have a little stilt foundation for platforms. I was actually kind of surprised to see how many base game elements fit really nicely into this pack, this build. I think this was using the restricted packs that I have for my Cottage Bays Let's Play, so I believe it's only base game, cottage living, seasons, cats and dogs, laundry day, and nifty knitting. Yes, that's right. And I was surprised at just how much from base game actually really worked for this, specifically the fences and columns. Granted, it would have been nice to see them in a different color, but all things considered, the shape of them actually worked pretty well. And I love this window from Laundry Day that kind of juts out. I thought that was really nice. I was originally going to make it into a little reading nook, but eventually, just with the placement of bookcases and where everything was going, and also the requirement for the library type or lot type, you're required to have a chess table, so I ended up putting the chess table in that window. I struggled a lot with the roofing for this lot, as you can see. I played around with it a bit, even if I had a vague idea of what I wanted it to look like. I always struggle with roofing. I hate roofing with a burning passion and tend not to be very creative with it, but I'm trying. yeah, this was another thing that gave me trouble was whenever I tried to create that loft space by removing the floor on half of that second floor, I ended up, the roofs ended up just converging in there, so I ended up having to move those out and adjust based on that so that I could have that lofted space. Because I really like having the lofted spaces where you can just look down and see the floor underneath you. I just think they're cool, so I like including them in my builds, and I think this was a really good opportunity for it. Sorry, I am so tired. This narration is taking a lot more out of me than I anticipated. Anyway, so I've only ever been to the real book mill once, so I don't exactly remember what the interior was like. I do remember there being, like you would see in a bookstore, different sections for the different genres of books, little study spaces, and a rather underwhelming cafe. So I just tried to make a version of that here that made sense for this particular lot. So we have a couple of different study areas, lots of bookcases, of course. I played around with just building these walls out of the bookcases, and I change up some of the locations of the desks. And then I wanted to have up in the loft space these kind of communal study area where you could get groups together for study dates or group projects and stuff like that. Whereas downstairs you have more of the secluded one-on-one study spaces where you'd put on your headphones and just do your homework or whatever. Yeah, it's the kind of place I would have liked to hang out when I was studying. And then on the side we have the little cafe, which is just the bar, and I open up that wall there to make it kind of pop out of the side. I'm not entirely sure if it's usable, but since this is a library lot, people wouldn't be ordering from the bar anyway. And then there's just the little picnic area outside where you can have a nice little meal. When I was taking screenshots of it, I brought a sim over. This was in my test save file. I brought one of my sims over right at sunrise or right before sunrise. And the picture I got out there, the sun was just barely starting to come up, and there were still stars in the sky, and it looked so pretty. One thing I tried to keep in mind, and something that I don't usually do, was using the toggle at the top to change the time of day. I usually just keep it set to afternoon so that I can see what I'm doing. But this time I really wanted to make sure I paid attention to how it was lit on the outside, so later on I set it to nighttime and go in and place lights to give it kind of an almost fantasy, ethereal kind of glow, because, I don't know, that just seemed like a really nice place. I can imagine Sims walking along on that covered balcony in the back, going down the platform stairs, and just walking along the water and, I don't know, saying things that Sims say to each other about how they love each other and all that jazz. I don't know. The things that Sims do, And I tried to keep the lighting very warm. I didn't want to use too many of the harsh LEDs, and I wanted to keep that nice glow. So one thing I did was I sized down these outdoor lights and raised them up to go on top of the banisters and above the bookcases, just to give it a little extra lighting. And they look like little lanterns, and I thought that was nice. And I tried to use a lot of the cottage living lights, because I thought those also fit the vibe pretty well. Now here, I recently discovered the wonders of the Build by Debug menu. I haven't played a lot with it in the past, but there were some things from it that I knew I wanted, like this water wheel, which I'm pretty sure turns when you go into live mode. And I've desperately wanted those market lights, but they were too big and did not fit. So I just kind of went to town on the outside. We'll get to that a little bit later. And I'm not entirely happy with the foundation situation, but I think we did the best we could with what we had. Yeah, and I was surprised that I ended up using pretty much all base game windows, just because they fit the walls a little better than the cottage living ones did. Except for, of course, the circle one at the top. And even though this is supposed to be a mill, and I think mills traditionally have more of like the stone to them, the book mill, as I remember it, did have this very classic barn type siding to it. And I liked this one, I believe it's from Cats and Dogs, how it has that more like weathered look to it in terms of the color. I don't know. I think it gives it that nice rustic edge. Yeah, I had a bit of a time trying to figure out the landscaping and the interior. Basically, this took me, I think, about 4 hours altogether to build, which to seasoned builders is probably not a lot, but to me it is a lot of time spent on one thing. But I was really excited to do it, and I had a lot of fun with it. It was fun to go in and find all these clutter items to stick on the desks, like the little stacks of books, and you have the backpacks in this little more secluded study area. And the notebook and the quill, that's totally where I'd be hanging out. And then just trying to put in these like mismatched old tables to make it feel a little bit more homey. I do go in later and change the swatches on a bunch of the furniture so that it's a little bit more mismatched and you get that rustic farmhousey feel to it. I thought that was pretty important. Also, I feel sunflowers are important. And you know what? That reminds me. Why don't we have sunflowers in the game? We have some in the base game, but they're so small. They're so out of scale with what actual sunflowers would be. I want like these giant sunflowers that I can like put along a hedgerow. And they're also just so sparse. You have to place like a million of them to give them the actual like depth that you want to get out of them. So I don't know, I thought this would have been a great pack to see sunflowers, but then again, I'm not sure how many sunflowers you see in England, and this world is based on England, so. I am from the US, as you can probably tell from my accent. So for this part, I actually am... Oh, okay, never mind. We'll go back to that later. But one thing I wanted to do, even though it's not entirely necessary, is I wanted to build a handicapped bathroom stall. Because I think disability representation is very important, and even though we don't have disabilities in The Sims... I mean, I guess some traits could be construed as disabilities, and we do have injuries introduced with Snowy Escape, so you have it to an extent, but you don't have things like mobility aids, or hearing aids, vision aids that are actually functional. You just have, cosmetic glasses. I still thought it was important to put a handicapped bathroom in here. And, of course, I wanted to deck the place out with wisteria. I'm still not the best at placing wall decorations from Debug, especially. And I don't usually use Debug wall decorations in my residential lots, just because they don't go down when you put the walls down. Or at least I'm pretty sure they don't. But I thought they looked really nice here. Oh, and now here's the part of the show where I search frantically for every type of rock I can use to build up this, not really cliffside, but like bank, I suppose. And I found that the Cats and Dogs rocks were really good. I'm not sure where they exactly they are in the game, but I imagine they're at the seafront, which is why they just work so well with the water. And then there's a few from Cottage Living as well. I think a couple from base game. And also, if you're looking for other debug rocks, there's quite a few in Snowy Escape. obviously because of the mountain. So yeah, I struggled a lot with placing rocks, because if I could get them to cover the submerged areas that I wanted to cover, a lot of the times I'd find they were floating. And then just trying to find ones that were the correct scale was a bit of a challenge. So again, I ended up using these cats and dogs rocks quite a bit, and yeah, they're a bit mismatched, and I think some of them are still floating a little bit, but yeah, it took me a long time to do this. As you can see, this is sped up 10 times, I believe. So the fact that it's taking this long on 10 times speed should tell you what you need to know about how much time I spent looking at and resizing rocks in debug. And then there was this bridge that I really wanted to get to work, but again, with the uneven terrain, it was quite a struggle to figure out how to get it all to show up without clipping too much into the ground, but also get it so that people can walk on it. I have no idea if your Sims can walk on it. They probably can't. But they can walk around, I guess. Yeah, I realize I really should have playtested this, but it'll be fine. I'm sorry, I'm usually better about this kind of thing, but again, this was one of the longest builds and most involved builds I'd ever done, and I'm still getting over the learning curve in build by. Like, I see so many simmers on YouTube and on Twitter, and they do such incredible things, and I'd love to be able to do that, but I'm not quite there yet, and that's okay. I probably never will be there. But I do what I can, and I'm proud of what I've been able to do, including find plants in debug. Yes, before it was rocks, now it's the plants. Plants everywhere, especially grass. Yes, this little patch of base game grass went a very long way. I think I might have gone overboard with it in some places, to the point where it looked a little less realistic, but it's The Sims. It's fantasy. It's fine. Yeah. So I keep having to pause in my voiceover recording because I am so tired. Yay. I'm guessing it's the mono. At first I thought it was a viral throat infection, because I used to get them all the time when I was still commuting to work. Because I would take public transit, and people are disgusting. But since I'd been working from home for over a year, I hadn't gotten one, and then I got this, and I'm like, oh goodness, where did I pick this up? But no, apparently it's mono, which would explain why for the past 3 days I haven't been able to get through the day without a nap. I think it was Wednesday. I was so tired that when I hit the last half hour of my shift and there was nothing to do, I just brought my work computer to bed with me and just took a 2-hour nap, and it was glorious. Yes, I'm a terrible employee, so sue me. Hey, if there's no work to do... Oh, so this part right here, I was struggling to get these stupid fences to line up, and I spent probably more time than necessary trying to, even out the terrain. And of course that was all for nothing, because I eventually go in and just get rid of those walls and just put in the stone fence so that it goes along the terrain rather than being all segmented like that. Excuse me. Yeah, just playing around with the debug plants, and I had a lot of trouble trying to just build things up so that they weren't floating in midair, because again, I don't usually play with uneven terrain, so I haven't discovered all the tricks to evening them out. Although one thing I found that I did like that actually kind of helped was these base game bushes with the shading underneath them. When you look at them, yeah, you can still kind of tell they're floating if you're looking at them, but because they have that shading underneath, it kind of gives you a little bit more of a buffer than you would with just the flat ones. And of course, I wanted to put a whole bunch of ivy on it. I had no strategy or rhyme or reason to that. And yeah, going through, I wanted to include curtains, but I found that I'm a little disappointed with the curtains that came with Cottage Living. I'm a little disappointed with all of the curtains in Sims 4. It is so hard to find decent curtains, but I found that those, like, plaid country-looking curtains from Cats and Dogs fit really well, and there were a bunch of different swatches with them that worked nicely, so I thought having the mismatched look kind of tied in with that overall theme. So here we are. I did check, and unfortunately the front of the lot is the side of the mill. At least it's the side with the water wheel, so you have something nice to look at. And had I not been about 3 hours into the build with this much detail, especially with the terrain elements, I might have tried to rotate it. I probably should have done that in the beginning. But again, I'm not the most seasoned of builders, so it didn't occur to me to take that step in the beginning. But now, hopefully next time I'll remember to. Oh, and the other thing was getting these stupid flowers centered. Took way longer than necessary. Yeah, trying to line things up on shelves and tables has always been a bit of a struggle for me. But from watching other YouTubers, I've learned a lot of tricks. Oh god, I was watching this video by Dr. Ashley once where she was doing her Dream Home Decorator Let's Play. And I saw her move the coffee grinder. She was able to free place it by sizing down an island, hiding the island in the counter, and then freely placing that wherever she wanted. I'm like, oh my god, this is brilliant. I can't believe I never thought of this. Actually, I can believe it, because I've never been all that creative with my builds, and now, learning from other simmers, I'm learning to be a bit more creative, like with putting these lights on the fences and stair railings. That's my contribution to build creativity. I know, it's a thing of wonder. So yeah, I pushed myself out of my comfort zone in a lot of ways with this build, with terrain manipulation, with terrain paint, with outdoor lighting, with just building something so big, with using the debug menu, and you know what? I had fun. I did this over 2 days. The first day I recorded for an hour, the second day I recorded for 3 hours, and I was just so deeply invested in it that I didn't even notice time passing. Don't you love when you get in that kind of groove and, just time just goes wherever it wants to? I don't know, I think it's fun. Anyway, I think we're finishing up, so I'm gonna sign off here. I hope you enjoyed this, and take care of yourselves, bays. Love you.